Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 32 of The Rest is Giant Robots. I'm Simon Furman,
And I'm Andrew Wildman.
and as we always say, you've tuned into the wrong podcast if you don't know what we're talking about or who we are.
I sometimes think I've tuned into the wrong podcast.
Well, yes.
So I
I,
don't know what we're talking about either.
I wake up in the morning and think I've tuned into the wrong life. I was like, what do I do again? Oh, yes. Yes, so here we are. Uh, you would be able to see if you were watching in video format that behind me is one of our drawings, concept art for the engine industrial strength, which was a project we created when we were Wildfur. Well, we're still Wildfur, but
Yeah.
Wildfur was a sort of ideas factory for a few years, and we're going to be talking a bit more about that. We had a question just asking us for a bit more detail on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
For a while, none of which actually got anywhere. But that's the thing with these things, you know.
Mm,
You have to put in a lot of legwork. But then, and I guess we did a lot of it when we had a bit of downtime, didn't we? Kind of between jobs.
yeah.
And I was working at Rebellion as well, so I had a normal job in inverted commas. So I was getting a paycheck, so it meant that my free time was my own. Was when you're freelance, it's like unless you're incredibly disciplined, it kind of bleeds over all of your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was trying to sort of put myself back to where I was at the time, and geographically, my wife and I had just moved into Milton Keynes
Yeah.
house that
Mm.
we basically just needed to sell at the time. And you were in Chippy, weren't you, by this point? I think we're talking about 2001-ish
Yeah, well,
time.
the engine started slightly earlier than that, didn't it? Because I was still living in Bedfordshire when we first started putting it together. I can't remember when the first idea happened because it was prior to all the other raft of ideas that we did, wasn't it? So it's prior
Yes.
to Monster Maker and
Mm.
Miss Matador and all those kind of other things that you came up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, first of all, I mean, maybe we should just wind back to the very beginnings because I can't remember offhand whether we formed Wildfur and then started developing ideas, or we developed the idea for the engine and sort of Wildfur was our
Hmm.
company entity to
Yeah,
support it.
I think it was because I remember designing the Wildfur logo, not the one we have now, but the original shiny late 90s logo. um, at the same time that I was, doing the very, very first concepts for the engine.
Yeah.
And
And
that was late 90s. That was 98, 99.
yes. So, it goes over a fair span of time because I was looking at a pitch we did that looks aimed at TV animation, and that's copyrighted 2004.
Yeah.
So, there was we didn't give up easily on this. It definitely we kept trying to adapt it to another media, but we started really as a motion comic, wasn't it? Or some form of early motion comic.
Yeah. And that came about because I think you had the idea. I can't remember what the very, very original idea, but you had the idea, and I don't think we necessarily knew what to do with it. I would
Mm,
imagine we probably initially thought, let's do a comic or
mm,
something. Um, but then a friend of mine that I he worked in the music industry, so he's very, very tech savvy. This guy. This was back in right at the
mm,
back end of the 90s. And he was the first person that ever said to me, "You ought to do it online,"
mm.
because he was a very, very early adopter of online because the internet then was, very early days.
Yeah, it really was. And that's what I thought when I was just doing a little bit of catch up on this, that I thought, well, considering we were thinking motion comic and internet, it was really early doors, wasn't it?
It was very early doors, and so he mentioned that, and he kind of talked to me about his knowledge of how that could work, and then when when I started working for Rebellion, so that was 1999. So I was working for Rebellion for 6 months before I then moved over to Oxfordshire. And so I'd already done quite a lot of work on the engine before I moved. So that was right at the beginning of when I was working for Rebellion. So 1999 and then into 2000.
Mm.
And it was at Rebellion that I met Adam Jennings, and he was the one that because he designed the Rebellion, the first Rebellion website. He was a web designer. Again, early days of coding and very, very different to how you do it now.
Yeah,
And so he helped with that. And at the time there were motion comics. There was a company called Cool Beans that used
yeah,
to do motion comics. But I mean, I never particularly liked them. I've said this a number of times before. It to me, it was always like, okay, is this like a really cool online visual motion comic, or is it just really shit animation? Because that's essentially what it was. It was just
yeah,
like a comic with bits kind of chopped up, and so they would very slightly move, or a little bit of something in the foreground that would move, past the
yeah,
camera or whatever, but really, really basic. Um, and so I discussed all of this with Adam, and we did do some animation, but the two things that we did was we tried to make it load efficiently. So we were starting to use vector graphics rather than just scanning in comic art. So
mm,
that makes the loading times a lot quicker. And the
yeah,
animation we put into the navigation of how you went through the comic.
right. And this is Adam Jennings, isn't
Adam
it?
Jennings, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
S-
Um, and also sound. We dropped in some sound as well.
Mm,
So we had some music written by Ed Cookson, who
mhm.
was working at Rebellion, amazing sound designer. He works in events management now. He's partner in a company. He's done incredibly well since then.
Mm,
But he wrote some music for us, which was great because I think he was nominated for a BAFTA for music on one of the Rebellion games.
great.
Probably
Wow.
even did probably even did win a BAFTA. But so there was a lot of early days tech going on there, which I found
Mm,
absolutely fascinating. But early days tech, I can remember somebody saying, I saw a thing online, and when website building, when people got, people were building websites, but then you started to get bits of software that came out that was a bit more drag and drop, a bit easier for people. And somebody said the analogy between some of those new ways of building websites, which a lot of them are like that now, like, Wix and Squaresoft or whatever it's called, but all these different things that people use to build websites, as opposed to the old days of building it in WordPress. And the analogy was like building a website in WordPress is like trying to cut a loaf of bread with a saw. It's like you're putting in
yeah,
all this kind of effort, and it's just a complete mess. Um,
yeah,
but it was a lot of work for and we did 3 episodes, didn't we?
yeah. Now, I've got a question for you. Do those episodes still exist?
I can't find them on the internet anywhere, and I don't know. I'm sure I lodged them somewhere, but I can't find where. But we put them on a CDs, didn't we?
Yes.
So I think if we
Yeah,
can find any of those CDs, find one of those CDs, then we can. I should be able
yeah,
to rip it off the CD and then put it up.
yeah. I mean, it'd be great. I mean, apart from anything, I'd love to see it again because these are things I don't think I've seen since that time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the when I started building stuff in with 3D software, because I was drawing all the foreground characters as like flat comic art, and then after a while we started doing it as vector art. but the backgrounds were all computer generated models, built in with a piece of software called Strata 3D Vision or something, which is a
Hmm.
very early one of the early packages. Unless you could afford to buy 3D Studio Max or some of that stuff the games were being built in. There were other packages, and I had this thing called 3 Strata Vision, and it was the software that was used for the incredibly successful game Myst. I don't know if you ever played
Yeah.
Myst. A lot of
No,
people,
I know of it.
yeah, a lot of people, and that whole game was built with Stratavision, and I was, using the same software to do it. But again, that was trying to build models in that was like trying to cut a loaf of bread with a hammer, let alone
Yes.
a saw. It was so
Yeah.
difficult. But it rendered
Yes.
nicely. You could put surface
Mm.
textures on things, so that was quite nice,
Okay.
and light things. So the garage workshop place where I built all that as well. God,
Yeah. Well, I
oh,
mean, I've got and I've I sort of scanned what I had, and we've got whole interiors of the forge or whatever we
the
called
forge. That's it. Yeah,
the sort of the base of operations. Every angle is sort of covered
yeah,
of that warehousey space because it was very steampunk industrial future, wasn't it?
yeah.
And there was there was a lot of work gone into the design of their gear,
Mm.
their heavy duty. They were maybe I should just read because people I don't suppose know what the engine was about. Um, da, da, da. So they were industrial troubleshooters in this sort of highly mechanized, we called it Greater London. Uh, they're pulled to one catastrophe after another. Um, there was a sort of big industrialist guy, uh, uh, Scott King the Third. They kind of there's some kind of enemy attacking this Greater London, and this guy enlists the engine as a sort of last line of defense against
Yeah.
this sort of attacker. I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, I could read. I've got pitches and pitches here of the thing. I've got the animation pitch reads a world on the brink of extinction, ripe for exploitation, a target for invasion. The engineer's industrial strength is an action adventure show, you see,
Mm.
combining the breathless edge of disaster thrills of Thunderbirds with the larger than life technological hardware of Transformers. Hey, name drop. Us, colourful characters, dire villains, and stunning and visually dynamic machine settings are just some of the key facets in this highly licensable property. Yeah. So, yes, this is not the Earth we know. Here, the relentless march of industrialization never ended, never downscaled, and now society is dependent on sprawling machines the size of city blocks, energy gobbling leviathans, etc. The planet's natural resources are, and it's all going towards extinction. Freelance mechanical troubleshooters, they go where others fear to tread, into the heart of monstrous machines teetering on the edge of catastrophic collapse. And they've got these MTEs, which are their mobile tactical ergo suits.
Mm.
See, we put a lot of thought into this. It has they're mere supplements to their own improvisational technical skills, extra human abilities, and sheer guts, etc. Saving the world is all in a day's work. And then we get this. The sleepless. That
Yeah.
was the that was the enemy, a threat from beyond our dimension, an inhuman force set on invasion and colonization. Okay, so that was kind of the the gist of various versions of it.
Mm. I
It
seem
was,
to remember your kind of just like one line to describe it was steampunk Thunderbirds originally.
yeah,
And
I
that
think
did kind of capture essentially what it was because they're troubleshooters, they're not an armed
no,
force as such or any of those kind of things or a SWAT team. They were so Steampunk Thunderbirds was a really good description of it. But then it had that added thing, like you just said, where not only were they dealing with disasters going on on Earth, or in these big cities, but then all of a sudden something else was breaking through from somewhere else, which was the
Yeah.
Sleepless,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that was fascinating.
Yeah. And we had our four lead characters, HGV, Axel, Steam Press, and Shift. And the mobile tactical ergo suits had a transformable
Yeah, of course
nature
they
to
are.
them. What a
Yeah,
what a surprise.
who'd have thought, eh?
Yeah.
What was the
But anyway,
genesis
yeah,
of that?
do see if you, I mean, we've got some visual stuff that we can share with you,
Hmm.
and that's just for the Patreon viewers, but we will share that and any other stuff we can unearth. But what we'd love to do is be able to show you one of these very early motion comics if we can
Hmm.
find them.
Hmm. Yeah, we
But
were.
yeah,
I must have one of those CDs somewhere, or I'll have another dig around. I looked on some old hard drives, but I
mm,
couldn't. I couldn't find
no,
it
I mean,
anyway.
we are going back to best part of 25 years, so
Oh God.
I know, scary.
I mean,
Uh,
when we were doing when we were doing that stuff, so 2000, whatever, 25 years ago. So I'd what would I have been? Well, I'd have late 30s,
mm, yeah,
25 years prior to that, just to kind of give it some context, you know.
yes, yeah, no, yeah, we were just teenagers or whatever.
It just makes you think, doesn't it? How long
Yeah.
ago that all was. But there you go. But I mean, the bits I've seen, the bits that I remember, the bits that you sent, and whatever. It's still, I mean, it has got a bit of a sort of 90s, sort of early 2000s look to it, but I think
Hmm.
it still holds up.
I think it's something, we should definitely consider doing something with, just because we've got so much here that we crafted with it,
Mm,
that it wouldn't take much just to push it into some form of storytelling and get it out there.
mm, I think
But
so.
yeah, time is often the issue. But yeah, we'd like to. I mean, the other thing I really liked was, I mean, I was thinking back, because if it was the end of the 90s, I was quite busy with TV animation stuff at the time.
Mm,
After my Beast Wars episode, Bob Forward, who was one of the script editors on Beast Wars, took me with him on subsequent shows. So we worked on Dan Dare. They did a CGI Dan Dare.
mm,
Um, they did a cartoon show, a 2D show called Roswell Conspiracies, Alien Myths and Legends,
yeah.
and on I rolled with that. And so in one way, I think that was a fairly busy time for me. But what I loved, I think, was this early idea of creator owned material, of
Mm,
owning something that now we actually do and is out there. But I think the idea of having our own IPs, our own company entity, was kind of exciting too.
yeah.
Wildfur itself really was the driving force for me to do this stuff. It was that idea that ultimately we didn't own Transformers. We were never going to get royalties from Transformers.
Mm,
But if we could create something, as owners, we would have that control and effectively also, reap any benefits down the line.
mm. Yeah, and we approached a lot of people with the engine as a concept. I mean, we had a meeting with Bob Thompson when he's big in the animation industry, but where he was working on Bionicles. That was a Lego
That's right.
product, wasn't
Lego.
it?
Yeah, I remember going into the Lego offices or whatever,
Yeah, where was it? Slough or somewhere like that, wasn't it?
somewhere
Swindon or
like
something.
that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think there's a lot of good feedback for it. But when you're approaching other companies like that to try and go a bit larger, then obviously it's huge investment consideration for them.
Yeah.
But I think they saw the potential of all of that.
Hmm. I don't think, yeah, I don't think that even sort of fundamentally, I still look at it and think we could do something with this. It's not really lost its relevance. I
No.
think we might have to make it, you know, a little bit less late 90s, early 2000s and more of the, but I mean, it's a science fiction concept, other world, other timeline. So, I don't think it would take much adaptation.
No, I mean, and it kind of evolved, didn't it? So when we first came up with the idea, it was very much a kind of gritty graphic, sci-fi graphic novel, I
Mm,
kind of thing, um, because that was appropriate to the time when we thought of it. And then when we kind of it we left it was dormant for a while, and we're doing other stuff. But then we kind of refreshed it a bit, and like the image you've got behind you there, where they've got these individually colored costumes, and we were
mm,
trying to make it a bit more animation TV friendly, potentially a bit more toy licensable, all those things that you have to build into it when you're approaching animation and
yeah.
toy companies. So it was a brighter, more yeah, I guess more
Hmm,
not child friendly, but I don't know, whatever. You could see it as
hmm.
animation. But then
Yes,
when we
yeah.
went back and readdressed it again after a little while, and you said there was a 6 issue pitch for a comic series that you'd put
Mm,
together.
yeah.
And that went darker again, didn't it? That went gritty and dark, and
Yes.
that I really liked when we did that. I mean, I liked both kind of flavors, but the idea of doing that, I thought there's some really cool stuff in there. It,
Yeah. I mean, I think we pushed it through various iterations, but the the no pun intended, as you'll see in a minute, the core concept
mm.
was sort of the same in each
Oh
iteration.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think we felt the need to tamper with that. And I don't think I would again. I think there's so much sort of stuff that's there. But yes, it would be, finding the time and proper outlet for it now.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. But the other thing with Wildfur was we well, we took that Wildfur idea and ran with it because we then started trying to develop some other concepts with other artists as well.
Mm,
I mean, the first one we jumped on, I think you were the artist, but it was called the Core, Core,
mm.
and it was a engine spin-off, even though I'm not sure the engine was anything to say, well, we can spin off from that. But that was, and frustratingly, I can't find any of the detail about the core. I've got an image
Yeah.
of the team, but I don't have obviously the back stuff I must have done, backstory stuff for that. But it was definitely an engine industrial strength spin-off.
But it was kind of like I can't remember much about the idea of it, but they were like almost like a B team, but they did
Hmm.
slightly they went on slightly different kinds of missions,
Yeah,
bit more
I just can't.
covert kind of. I can't remember.
I can't remember how it fitted all in, but I've got deep files of this stuff still, so I'll see if I can find it.
Mm,
But we also got Jeff Senior in to do some concept art for a series called Ms. Matador,
mm,
which was far more monsters and sword play than very different to the engine
yeah.
in concept. And again, some of the art we can share is Jeff's concept for the character and her fighting a sort of Minotaur-esque monster.
Mm.
So yeah, so that one we did a little bit of groundwork on, and I can't remember the name of it, but we did also got Kev Hopgood to do
Mm.
some designs for us for another series.
Yeah, you did. What was that one called?
Can't find that one at the moment, but I may have it again somewhere.
Yeah. And then of course there was Monster Maker.
Yes, yeah, I mean, and that's the one, strangely, that never quite went away, did it?
No.
It's still kicking around and in a slightly different form is with a company that basically promotes ideas towards the idea of TV animated shows.
Yeah. Yeah. So we pitched it to them again. Monster Maker. I'd shown that to various people, but I we redesigned the characters on that so many
Mm,
times. But the initial idea of it, with the initial design drawings, I showed to um, Helen Howells at Ho Ho Entertainment. So I was working with Ho Ho Entertainment because they're the company that put together and released Shane, what is eventually became called Shane the Chef. So the TV show that I developed with Simon Jowett, they're always Simons,
yes.
a writer. So it was an idea that myself and my wife came up with for this for a kids preschool show with a chef as a character. And that I kind of touted that around, and eventually got picked up by Ho Ho Entertainment, and eventually got made into a 52 episode series. That was great, but when were first trying to get pick up on Shane the Chef, it was really called Jeff the Chef. And we went to an animation festival in Poland, me and Helen and Oliver, her partner in Ho Ho Entertainment. So the three of us went over them. We did a big presentation at the animation festival. We'd got the concept art and everything for Jeff the Chef as it was, trying to get some pickup. We got a lot of interest. And then I think it was on the plane on the way back. I showed Helen. I said, "I've got this other thing. I know we're fully into trying to get Jeff the Chef off the ground, but it's got this other thing called Monster Maker that I did with a writer colleague, Simon Furman." She looked at it, and just the initial image, she was like, because that's the way that she kind of works, working in kids' TV. She was like, "Boom, yeah, that looks really interesting." It just had that thing. I want to know more. And they have ever since. They've always wanted to know more, and
Mm,
together with them, we've evolved it, massaged it into slightly different shapes to try and get it, to sit well for them to be able to try and get it placed.
yep. Change the title, all sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it again, again, I've got that early illustration you did for Monster Maker in that pack of stuff I sent over, and that, you can see how much the character of Jonah, particularly the
Mm.
lead boy, has changed in since then.
I still prefer him as he was originally.
Yes, yeah, I know, but you do what you can, don't you, to get these things made.
Yeah, of course you
So,
do. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so that's Wildfur, and we still exist as Wildfur, of course. And after or during all this, we almost got together with Titan and became the Transformers publisher.
Yeah, I
So
know. Yeah. And
and
we covered that in
like
a
I say,
previous
that
episode, didn't we? But I
we
think
did.
you nailed
Yes.
it when you said, I think we kind of dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
We'd
Yes.
have been
Yeah.
bankrupt
And
now, wouldn't we? I think.
or or crazy or something. It would have been such a huge undertaking, and it would have just dominated. However it had gone, it would have dominated our lives from that point on, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'd have been very tied to Titan, and that's not a criticism of Titan at all, but it would have meant that everything we were doing now as a sort of company, cross company thing, and that inevitably involves more people,
Mm.
more layers of I suppose just paperwork and everything. So we'd have got tied up in that and probably not really been creating that much. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I meant really by dodged a bullet. I think it would have
It
swamped our
it would
careers.
have taken over our lives, yeah, and I mean it would have been great in a way, but it would have been a lot of work, a lot of stress, and it would just wouldn't have time to do anything else.
No,
I wouldn't
no,
have ended up
definitely
doing storyboards, and that
no. And many other things may not have happened. And yeah, it's where we are now. It's a nice place where somebody else was doing the legwork on Transformers comics and
mm,
really setting it up for just continuing on and on, really. So
Mm.
I think, it's worked out fine. But
Mm.
yeah, Wildfur, we still are Wildfur. We still have, a somewhat live project in the shape of Monster Maker out there. So yeah, you never know what the future will bring, but it's
Mm.
just nice to have a kind of company entity between us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of a Wildfur recap. Again, if there's anything else you'd like us to double back on, do let us know. But we have got a couple of questions which will uh, in from who sent the questions? Remind
They were
me so we can.
from Ben Willis.
Ben Willis. Hello,
Hi,
Ben.
Ben. Yeah, a couple of
Yeah,
great
thanks.
questions that came in, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of ask me mine and I'll ask you yours?
Yeah. I'll just, he's into it. Hi, Andrew and Simon. He said, I'm enjoying the pod as always and have a couple of in depth questions that may provide food for future releases. Well, there you go. Here we are. This is that time. Um, he said, we've just reached issue 215 of the UK Transformers comic in the online book club that I run. And we're wondering about the
Mm.
following. So, Simon, this is quite a long question, but hopefully you can you can
Yeah.
get through it. But anyway, so Ben says, Simon, Time Wars trimmed question mark. Read all the editorial content as well as the stories themselves and the usual Marvel UK build up to Time Wars made specific mention of the final showdown between modern day Ultra Magnus and Galvatron, which never really came to pass. What's more, when reading the story itself, there are story threads that appear to have been started and then quietly closed down, e.g., the theft of Scorponok's head. I don't remember thinking about that.
I
The
do.
theft of, I'm sure you do, yeah. That's why I'm asking you, and you're not asking me. The theft of Scorponok's head, Soundwave's future Decepticons traveling back to 1989, etc. We've heard rumours that Time Wars had to be curtailed slash shortened, and wondered if you could speak to that, and if so, what the reasons were. Was there a longer, more expansive tale on the cards to begin with?
Yeah, I don't think with Time Wars anything was actively cut out. It was more that the story evolved as I was writing it. I think there were things I'd love to have fitted in, but we never had more issues than we thought we had, if that makes sense. I always knew we had to have however many parts it was, 7 or 8 parts. That was the story.
Mm.
We never really had a kind of flexible length. So I would say if things didn't end up in Time Wars like Ultra Magnus Galvatron or Scorponok's head thing, I think that was more that I'd maybe, when I was writing that editorial copy, which I was at the time, just gone, we can do all this. And then the reality of writing Time Wars, which had a lot of legwork to do,
Mm.
we didn't know at that point we were going to 5-page black and white. So it doesn't feel like we would have cut back on story. It was just there was so much story to
Mm.
finish off Galvatron's whole story arc that things didn't quite work out. We couldn't quite maneuver those characters into a rematch because it also felt like it should be Optimus Prime at the end of
Right.
that big story. So it evolved. Often stories, we never really did a overview. We by that stage, we just said, okay, Time Wars. Here's the pitch on a napkin. I need to do this. I'll write it and see how it unfolds. And it was often an evolving process working on the scripts back in those days. And yeah, it was just like, well, I may have wanted to do those things, but they just weren't feasible within the 8 parts of the story. So, no, things weren't scaled back, but a certain reality check may have come in as I
Yeah.
was writing it that I just can't do everything in this. It's
Yeah.
busy as it is.
It's kind of interesting you say there wasn't a comprehensive overview as such, because I remember you doing that with Regeneration was one where there was a comprehensive overview. So I guess
Yeah.
you hit all those marks, but if it wasn't nailed on and you were just kind of writing it and writing and writing it, obviously with a clear intention of where you were going, but yeah, certain things will get left behind, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, say Regeneration 1, that was a presentation to IDW editorial and Hasbro to say this is how this could work. We
Right.
never really did that back in the day. It was by then, I don't think Hasbro were really looking over our shoulder too much. And I was also editor of the comic as well as the writer on the comic. So I was effectively, even though Richard Starkings looked at all my scripts, driving the direction of the story completely at that point.
Right. Okay. So it's all your fault then that
It's all
these
my
things
fault, yeah, though it never happened.
you can't
And
blame your
yeah.
editor.
And I'm pretty sure that if we hadn't gone to 5-page black and white, those those story points, maybe not Ultra Magnus and Galvatron, but Scorponok's head, would have returned to the story. I don't think I was
Mm.
forgetting those things. And the other, it's worth looking at those first few stories after Time Wars. They were conceived as 11-page color stories. Fall and Rise of Decepticon Empire was color and 11 pages, but Survivors and whatever the other one, Race with the Devil,
Mm.
they were 11-page stories carved up and then not colored, or certainly by then we knew we hadn't got color as a facility, which leads me nicely on to the question to you, to color or not to color. We've just reached the period of the Transformers book where the UK material has gone back to black and white. In this earliest transition, we're still reading UK strips of yours like Race with the Devil, here we go, that were drawn for colour but printed in black and white due to budget constraints. Lots of readers say they can tell when a black and white story was intended for colour as opposed to being drawn specifically with black and white in mind. I wondered if you could speak to the differences in approach to colour and black and white strip work, and also maybe how you felt about your work being presented without the intended colour in 1989. That's 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 putting a lot on your memory, but there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, there's a number of things in there. So I, I'm not sure that I was aware or even interested in whether they were going to be in color or not. I mean, obviously it's better if they're in color, but I wasn't necessarily part of that conversation. So when I was drawing them, I was just doing my thing, which I guess was based on, this is the most kind of the most what's the word? The nub of this is that there are artists who draw for black and white and there are artists who draw for color. Now, so with in terms of comics, I was so much weaned on Marvel US comics that everything I drew tended to have been influenced by that, and they were color comics. So the line style I would use would be very much like that. So whether I was drawing for black and white or for color, um, there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of difference. If I knew it was for black and white, I would put more black in, as in shadows. You would drop in black to kind of to get it, make it sit on the page better to get more contrast. When you know you're drawing for color, you don't have to worry about that so much because it's going to be colored in.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a very experienced artist, not like people like Dave Gibbons, for example, who was one of the, not generation, that sounds like a huge gap, but one of the kind of um, group of artists who've kind of forged the way before I did. I came along kind of after all those guys, and all those people who'd worked on books like 2000 AD, they were working in black and white, so they had to use a lot of shadow. You had to get that balance of black and white on the page to get it to kind of sit nicely on the page, get those contrasts, get the lighting all those kind of things. Um, so I would try to do some of that, but I wasn't as experienced as those guys. So my work tended to look very open, I think. There would be shading in it, and some of the work that I did, I, I did very definitely try to, because I was learning a lot in those early days, and looking at the work of Dave Gibbons, I was very much trying to get more black on the pages that I knew would be in black and white.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is the difference for artists when they're, when they're working in color or in black and white. And so, so just to add to that, we were both, myself and Simon were both at the Norwich convention last weekend
Yep.
before
Norcon.
at Norcon, and I picked up a copy of the collected works from the Scream comic that you worked on,
Mm,
which was all black and white. The skill of the artists that worked on those British black and white comics, when you compare to a lot of artists now, the skill in understanding lighting so you could render that in a black and white comic was just incredible. I mean, they really were illustrators, not just, they weren't necessarily just comic book artists. They really could illustrate in black and white.
yeah.
Um, but I
You know,
think I think for a lot of the Marvel UK stuff, if you weren't one of those guys, then your work tended to be more open because you were more influenced by US comics, I would
yeah.
say.
A couple of things on that. I mean, on Scream, I was lucky enough to work with an artist called Eric Bradbury, who was one of the kind of stalwart British artists of IPC and before. And he on a strip called The Dracula File, and he was great. He used black so effectively on the
Yeah.
page. Really. I mean, it was supposed to be a spooky comic, so it was dark, but he used blacks in a very, very just proficient way, never unclear what was going on, but the pages themselves were really sort of dense and great to look at.
Mm,
And on the Transformers thing, probably if you compare your art on Race with the Devil,
mm,
which was the first one that was going to be color and ended up black and white,
mm,
and say a later one like Out to Lunch, which was the little mechanical story in the bar.
mm,
Your art had evolved quite a bit,
mm.
but you can see that you, everything is more filled in, if you like, on the page.
Yeah.
You've not left stuff for color. It's got a lot more line work on the page. So I think, yeah, there was an evolution beyond the once we realized we were in black and white, the artists had to adapt a little bit so that we didn't get pages that just look far too white, if you like,
Mm.
on the page.
Yeah. I guess I did kind of shift style slightly. And I was looking at other artists as well. Like I say, all my not all my influences, but a lot of my influences were Marvel US, so looking at the line work on color books. But in terms of British comics that were a bit more contemporary, so not those older books like Scream or, the old war and football comics that I used to read that were beautifully illustrated by, these classic old artists, but somebody a bit more contemporary and of my generation, somebody like Steve Dillon was really good at rendering work for black and white. I mean,
Yeah.
the press button stuff he did in Warrior was great, and his 2000
Yes.
AD work was great. So for the out to lunch thing, I would definitely have been looking at the work of
Yeah.
Steve Dillon, somebody
I
like
mean,
that, and you can
I,
probably see it.
Warrior's a really good example of great black and white artwork throughout. You had David Lloyd doing V for Vendetta.
Mm,
Again, a great proponent of black and white and shadow and all those. You had Gary Leach on Miracle Man or Marvel Man as it was back in the day,
mm,
Steve Parkhouse. You had artists who really understood art being producing artwork for a black and white comic.
yeah, I don't know that many artists. Uh, there's one artist whose work I really like, and he's a contemporary of ours, um, who I think when it comes to well, his work's like it all the time, but when it comes to black and white, like understanding those old techniques of illustrating black and white comic art, that I think for me stands out above many, many others. That's Stas Johnson. And he did a graphic novel of Dracula. I can't remember the name of the publisher, but
Mm,
they publish graphic novels, a lot of classic kind of literature. And he was doing Dracula, but they colored it, and it's like, and it looks great in color, but the black and white artwork that Stas did on Dracula is just amazing. Just
yeah.
to anybody who's not heard of it, Google Stas Johnson and have a look at his work. I think he's genius. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So, okay. So thank you, uh, Ben, for those questions.
yeah,
That really was a good in-depth chat. And again, please do send in your questions, however you want to do it, um, to us, and we will, definitely get around to them. And thank you very much, Andrew. I think we're just about at our
limit.
somewhat cut off. Yes, that's right. Yeah. you know, s- yeah, our voices need a momentary rest. So we're going to say thank you very much for listening,
Yeah,
watching, whatever you're doing,
yeah,
and yeah, we'll see you soon for more. We'll probably start to move on again, bit more post Regeneration 1 stuff next time.
yeah. Fabulous. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.